Gator don't play no
Hello guys, it's Hound the Collector, and for this review we've got another special one. We're going to be taking an up-close first look at the brand new Gridiron Studios Gator Combat Airboat. And when you take a look at this beauty of a boat, the folks at Gridiron Studios aren't ones to keep quiet for long, and as to be expected, their mechanized division has pumped out another major release in the Gator, which is built off the main body of the Hound, with plenty of new parts to take our battles to the sea. But of course it doesn't come this way. So we're gonna need a little bit of elbow grease to get this Gator ready to go. So how about we go ahead and take a look at what it comes with. So for starters, we've got a pair of front-facing pontoons for the left and right sides, some roof armor, a forward-facing twin 50 cal upper with removable ammo cans, a pair of antenna, a pair of 50 cal barrels, a pair of chain gun barrels, a mounted heavy machine gun, a pair of mini rockets, a pair of missile pods, a pair of black jerry cans, a steering wheel, a gear shift, and some armored rudders for the propeller. So as you can clearly see, the Gator is built off the angular main body of the Jungle Hound, which is a surprisingly good base to start from. The raised armor plating and the riveting detail is present from the original release, and as you can see, it's been 3D printed out of this creamy green saturated color.
Not easy being green.
Which harkens back to retro vehicles from the 80s. The biggest difference is that the base seems to be pre-upgraded with some color-specific level 2 chariot upgrades for the Hound. Those doors also come with mounted chain guns in that same green color with a little bit of black armor plating. And then when we go to the front, the hooded light bar has some silver paint for the rectangular screens, and then below that, we also have some armor on the driver's side opening, just to give them a little bit of protection from some enemy fire and probably bugs. Now when we open the doors, just like the previous Hound, the seats on the inside are 3D printed out of a black plastic because they are connected to the chassis, which has this really nice silver dry brushing to bring out some of the details, like the porting that we're getting in these storage baskets. That dry brushing continues onto the front where we get the suspension system. And again, even though it doesn't function, I like how the spring is actually a separate piece. But the biggest difference by far is going to be the backside of this whole thing. The propeller and the pontoon are doing a lot to beef up the profile of this boat. However, we're not getting much in the way of paint. There's not an ounce of dry brushing except for maybe the midsection here where we have the opening of the storage area that can open where our figures can store some accessories, and it gets pretty deep in there too. We do get a decent amount of sculpted tread plate pattern where our figures might be sitting or standing. I like how some of the armor areas have been raised while others have been lowered. But I guess the real star of the show here is going to be this massive propeller, which blends in seamlessly with the backside of the main body. It's pretty smooth in all the areas that you might expect. However, it's contrasted by the rigid grating detail that we're getting on the outside of the perimeter, which is as sharp as ever. That grating, tread plate, and riveting detail continues to the front area of the propeller where we get this green dial, which can be used to spin the propeller. But you could also just as easily spin the blade with your finger if you wanted. Now these pieces are technically removable, we just need to give them a tug. These pieces fit very securely on the main body, so be careful when you're trying to remove these. Now these pontoons have these grooves on the side that will connect to the back of the propeller, so once they're removed, you can pop this off, but if you're having trouble, don't try to force it. Otherwise, you might end up breaking it.
So how do I take it out?
To remove this piece with greater ease, what you're going to want to do is gently pull on the back of it and you'll see this gap start to form. Once you do that, you are able to just slide it right off. Now the reason why we need to do it that way is because we have this shallow peg here on the bottom of the propeller, which slides right into the area where our hitch would be normally attached to. So if you wanted to take these pieces and attach them to a regular Hound, you technically could by removing the wheels. But the color won't really match well. So if this is something that you want to do, just be careful when you're swapping out the pieces. But now that we got the main details out of the way, it's time to start putting this thing together, starting with the front pontoons. These are two identical pieces, they're just mirrored, and the details that we're getting are pretty nice even though they are 3D printed out of one block of color. We get some raised tread plate pattern right here, as well as some armor plating in this loop that you could attach a chain or maybe a rope to. And then we get some raised shielding here that will help protect our suspension system. I also like the ribbing detail that we're getting when we get to the side of the pontoon. In any case, these are going to attach just like we would any wheel, so all we have to do is find the peg hole and then line it up with the peg. Next up, we have the roof armor. Again, same green color, lots of detail with the tread plating pattern. I love the raised shielding that we're getting to protect our passenger. And then we have a couple of connection points that will come in handy for some accessories later. When we flip it to the underside, we get these bars and pegs that will correspond to the gaps that we're getting on the roof of our Gator. Flip it around, line those areas up, and when you do so, it should snap into place. From here, it only makes sense that we attach our twin 50 cal upper, and I love the detail that we're getting on the main weapon of this piece. The black main body really does a nice job of standing out against the green of the upper. I like the texture that we're getting on the grips and the trigger, as well as the bolt handle that we're getting on the side to really lend to the realism of it. That's not to be outdone by the detail that we're getting on the iron sight, and then just below the openings of the barrel, we also get these two sculpted motors to help operate the 50 cal. We get a removable reinforced ammo can that has a slightly different scope than what we typically get. The details are just as sharp as ever. And speaking of 50 cal barrels, we get a pair of them. The porting detail is just as sharp as it's ever been, and then we also get a peg hole for a blast effect if we have one lying around. Moving on to the back, you can also see this peg that will be used to help attach it to the upper. However, please take note of this forked prong. This thing is going to snap in place when we attach it, and once you do, it's pretty much a permanent fix. You can remove it, but you risk chewing it up like I did, and it might make the connection weaker if you do it enough times. And once we have our barrels attached, all we need to do is slide this upper into our weapons adapter system that we're getting at the top here. But I do want to say I made a little bit of a mistake. I should have attached this first before attaching the roof armor. And the reason for that is, even though this can attach, as you can see, I can't get it front facing because it keeps running into the armor. So all we have to do is remove the armored roof. And to do that, you're just going to reach in from the inside and then pop it right off. Ah, much better. Next up, we have a pair of missile pods. Now, we've seen this sculpt before, but never done up in this color. We have some neon green tips for the front of the missiles, and then it's accented by these black portions on the back and the front, complete with all the other details that we've come to expect with this type of weapon. Now, as you can see, we have this keyed peg, and it will give us a few different options to attach it. We could attach it to the inside of the storage area, which is fine and well, but they're not going to be very useful on the inside, so I'd rather have them ready to attack. Like so. Just do the same thing to the other side. And voila! Speaking of firepower, let's go ahead and attach these chain gun barrels to the ones that are mounted on our armored doors. It's not quite as detailed as we're getting with the 50 cal, but it is enough to get the point across. We also get a prong at the end of this peg where it'll attach, so remember, once you do, it's pretty much a permanent fix. There we go. I like how it snaps into place. And then, not to be outdone, we also need a place to store these neon green mini rockets. I love the color that it's been 3D printed in, and then I also like this accent of black that we're getting towards the tip with some raised details on it to make it a little bit more interesting. We also get a peg hole towards the back that might be compatible with some blast effects that you might have lying around. And then most importantly, we also have this keyed peg hole that's going to come in handy for where we need to store this thing. They'll just connect to a peg on the underside of the door. Easy enough. And we'll just do the same thing to the other side. And because of the way the missiles store, you could almost act as if it's a surprise secret weapon when you deploy them.
Oh.
Wrapping up our weapons, we have this mounted heavy machine gun. I like all the mechanical bits that we're getting with the porting and other intricacies of this weapon. The only problem I have with it is that the box magazine isn't actually removable as it is with some of their older designs. However, they did manage to paint the ammo gold. We can get a 6-inch figure to grip it using these handles, and of course, it'll attach to our Gator using this peg. It's a pretty loose connection, however, it'll make posing it a lot easier once we have a 6-inch figure on the inside. Topping things off, we have a pair of antennae. The details are pretty simple, however it does get a bit more complex as we get towards the base where these diamond-shaped pegs are. And they'll fit right next to the missile pods on our Gator. And the sections where the antenna and missile pods attach can also rotate 360 degrees, so you can position for targeting or for aesthetics. And then we get a pair of black jerry cans that'll store in the back. Thanks to you viewers with military experience in my comment section, I now know that black jerry cans usually hold water while the green ones hold gas. I also learned that the color designation may vary depending on the situation, but for this review, you can pretend they're whatever you want.
Freshwater it is.
The design is simple enough. We get an X on the surface followed by the Gridiron Studios logo. I love how clean the 3D printing came across the surface, and I also like the attention of detail with these 3 handles. That's to make it easier for 2 people to carry or to pass around. Anyway, let's go ahead and put them in the back. There we go. And while we're focused on the back, it's time to bring in the final accessories with these articulated armored rudders.
Holy rudder!
It's mostly 3D printed out of a black resin, but we do get accents of green just to help it stand out a bit. I love the angular design of this armor plating, and then just check out how smooth it is as well. However, when we flip it to the back side of it, it's not quite as detailed. But the good news is these imperfections are going to be hidden when we attach it. As you can see, we have these pegs located on the top and on the bottom, which will fit into these grooves on the back of the propeller. So what we're going to do is fold the rudder on these hinges, find the pegs, and then line them up with these grooves. I like to get the bottom one and then just slide the top one into place. Do the same thing on the opposite side. And because of the bar attaching the 2 rudders, they'll move in the same direction when articulated. So you can actually simulate the Gator changing directions when being steered. And with that, our Gator is complete.
Look at the size of that gator.
This Gator is about 20 inches of awesome, and I have to say, the colors are really growing on me. I do wish there was a tad bit more silver and black accents to really make this thing pop, but for what it is, it does it pretty well. I'm pretty sure the folks at Gridiron Studios wanted to make this reminiscent of the water moccasin from the original G.I. Joe line.
They're getting away in the water moccasin.
Water moccasin comes with driver, other figures sold separately.
Oh, and I know what you're thinking.
Do they float?
Now the answer is technically yes, but it'll only last about 3 seconds.
That's what she said.
Now that's according to Mark himself from Gridiron, so I'd take his word for it. However, if you want a decent workaround, you can get a reflective surface like I have in my review space, which does give the feel like it's floating in water for those of you who like toy photography. So, I hope you're taking notes.
Write that down, write that down!
The only thing left to do now is to man it. And because of the vehicle that it takes inspiration from, I can see no better pilot than Copperhead. He's far from my favorite in the G.I. Joe classified line, however, he just got a whole lot more interesting now that we have a boat for him to operate. And to do that, he's gonna need a steering wheel and the gear shift. I like adding these 2 pieces last because it's easier to attach them while we're putting a figure inside. So to do that, we're just gonna put the steering wheel in Copperhead's left hand, and then we're gonna take the gear shift and we're gonna put that in his right hand. And now that we have that, we just need to get him in a vaguely seated position, open the door, and then slide him right in. There we go, we've got him all seated, and thanks to its more slender build, you should have an easier time getting him inside the driver's seat. However, getting him to grip the steering wheel or the gear shift will be a little bit more difficult because of all the extra attachments. So, if you want to make it easier on yourself, remove the front portion here. You should have an easier time accessing the port for the gear shift and the steering wheel. And then when you've done that, just clip this piece right back on. And now that we have Copperhead situated, we are going to need to have someone ride shotgun to man the heavy machine gun. And for that, I can think of no better co-pilot than a Cobra Eel. These are some of my favorite army builders, and I have about 9 of them, so I think I could spare one for the Gator. All we got to do, remove these flippers, and for good measure, his rebreather. And now that we removed his gear, he'll have an easier time fitting inside. There we go, we've got him seated inside and gripping the heavy machine gun. And the best part is, we can even store some of the Cobra Eel's accessories. What I like to do is take the flippers, open up the storage bin, and then just place them right in. We'll have no problem fitting in. You could do the same thing with the harpoon, but unfortunately, you'll wind up bending the tip of it when you're trying to put it in.
That's what she said. No.
That's why even though we still have a bit more room inside, what I like to do is put all the bulkier accessories on the storage bins on the side. That way a Cobra Eel still has easy access to them. And while we could definitely get another Cobra Eel to man the 50 cal, I think the best person for this job has to be Crocmaster. Just slip him right in, pry his hands open. I'm not gonna lie, Crocmaster looks pretty perfect up there.
Now that's how you supposed to shoot.
And the cool part is, if you want to seat a few more figures on this boat, we have a few options if we go towards the back. We get in this tread plate pattern on this makeshift seat that juts out from the front of this propeller. So even though it might not be the most comfortable seat in the world, I think it'd be the perfect spot for a stripped down Cobra Eel. And then if we go to the other side, we could use the back of these pontoons for another seat for a Cobra Eel. I think he looks pretty good right there. So all in all, if you get creative, you could probably sit between 5 to 7 figures on this boat.
Not too shabby, huh?
But now that we've got this boat prepped for the water, it's time for this gator to go hunting.
Gator don't play no
I guess you could say we shipwrecked shipwreck. Oh man, I can't believe he actually survived. Oh, I had no idea my review space was gator infested.
Just eat them all.
Now wrapping things up here, this wouldn't be a true Gridiron Studios review if I didn't show you a few options you may have if you want to get modular with the gator. So I've curated a small collection of newer and older releases that might give you a good idea of what options work best. So to get started, we'll need to remove the roof armor and the twin 50. And let's give the Earl a spin. Now it's gonna work, but the problem is the color won't match, and because of its wider profile, we won't have any room to reattach the roof armor, which kind of defeats the purpose of the gator. And with that in mind, the same is also going to be true for a heavy defense sentry turret, which can also act as an upper. It works too, but the color and size don't make it the best fit aesthetically either. We'll have a bit more luck with the V1 upper, especially if you have it in the shadow colors. The blacks and grays really help it to complement the gator, and we're able to attach our roof armor. However, we won't be able to swivel this piece very well, or tilt up and down very well for that matter, because it's hindered by the roof armor at the top. Not to mention, we don't really have any handles for our gunner to hold on to. Colors aside, our Fat Boy can also fit with the roof armor attached, and even though it also can't swivel very well, if you have the dual UAG weapon system, you can give a character like Crocmaster a little bit more mobility. See what I mean? But I think your best option by far is going to come from the Swamp Hound. This is the harpoon upper that comes with it, and it looks like it was tailor-made for the gator. Aside from this great weathering detail that we're getting on it, the green that we're getting for the 3D printing on the main body seems to be the same shade as the main body for our gator too. So I think it's going to be a great fit. And just check that out.
You know what? I kind of like it.
We get a machine gun, a harpoon,
My leg!
and some handles for a gunner like Crocmaster so he can swivel this thing. Very nice. Hey Crocmaster, you mind reeling that harpoon back in? Thank you. Oh, and would you look at that? It looks like you hooked a mounted machine gun. This is actually our chainsaw machine gun that came with our Swamp Hound, and just like the mounted machine gun that we get with the Gator, we can actually switch it out, and when we attach the included feed chute,
groovy.
but if you want something a little less gnarly, you can't go wrong with the grenade machine gun launcher that came with our standard Jungle Hound. And it also comes with an ammo belt of grenades that'll fit into our gap with the Gator. Not a bad look in my opinion. I think this alongside the harpoon is going to work very well together with the Gator. So now you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Gridiron.
And as for size comparisons, the Gator is about 20 inches long, 8 inches at its widest, and close to 9 inches tall to the top of the antenna. And like most Gridiron Studios offerings, it's going to be in the 6-inch scale, so that means it'll blend in perfectly with other 6-inch lines like the remastered Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Lightning Collection figures by Hasbro. Here's how it looks next to a few of Earth's mightiest Avengers figures from the Marvel Legends line. And of course it's going to fit in perfectly with the likes of the G.I. Joe Classified line with figures like the Cobra Eel, Copperhead, Crocmaster, Shipwreck, Chuckles, and Fiona the Alligator. Staying with the Classified line, here's how it stacks up against some other Cobra vehicles like the HasLab Hiss Tank and Cobra Stinger. And while they won't fit, you could probably fudge it in with 7-inch lines like the Suicide Squad figures by McFarlane Toys. Here's how it looks next to some sci-fi themed Cosmic Legion builders from the 4 Horsemen Studios Cosmic Legion line. And sticking with some retro vibes, here's how it looks next to the Mirage Comic TMNT figure, as well as Splinter and Shredder by NECA. I think it's going to look really cool, flanked by a couple of Robo Skulls by Skeletron. And as for other boats in my collection, here's how it stacks up next to the Hasbro Fortnite motorboat, as well as the Detour Customs Crusader longboat. And of course, it's going to pair up very well next to other Gridiron Studios flagship vehicles like the Phalanx with turret upgrade, just barely fitting in the frame there, as well as their standard Jungle Hound. And then here's how it looks next to a more recent addition in the Heavy Defense Sentry turret, and one of my favorites, a level 3 coil mech armor upgrade for the Cobra Flight Pod. And then finally, here's how it looks under black light. And dang it, no effect. I thought for sure that the retro green color was gonna pop under these lighting conditions, but oh well. So as for my final thoughts, Gridiron's Gator Airboat is a pretty fun release that helps fill a hole in our collections in that there aren't a lot of options for 6-inch scale boats out there. And it has weapons for days with a touch of modularity to keep things interesting, top-notch 3D printing, and I'm a big fan of the new pontoon pieces and the giant airboat propeller. From the colors, the rotating propeller, and the overall silhouette, you can definitely tell they took notes from the retro water moccasin from the 80s. But because it's built on the base of the Jungle Hound, it's definitely its own thing. Plus you can fit 5 figures easy on this thing, and the little bit of storage that you get is also a nice touch. But this thing isn't perfect. The retro color scheme takes some getting used to, and I could see it being a deal breaker for some who want a vehicle with more traditional muted military combat colors. We're also getting a decent amount of reuse with the Hound body, coupled with the $300 price tag now that the early bird price has ended. Not an easy pill to swallow. But with all the new pieces plus the pricing model to keep in mind, it's pretty consistent with other Gridiron Studios offerings. So, if you are on the fence, my recommendation is that you wait for this to be released in different color schemes. Gridiron Studios is all but guaranteed to release this in traditional jungle greens, a black and red shadow variant, and I could also see this thing coming out in a navy color too, not to mention the future upgrades that are bound to come out with this vehicle. But seriously, the retro color scheme isn't half bad either, and it's for that reason that I think the Gridiron Gator is pretty great. And regardless if it's this version or another one, if you're a Gridiron fan, I bet you'll think so too. But that'll do it for this review. Thanks for sticking around to the very end. I hope that it was not only entertaining, but that it gave you a better idea of what to expect with Gridiron's latest offering. And if so, be sure to drop me a like, comment, and share my video if you think others might find some value in it as well. Your continued support truly means more than you know. Be sure to stick around for a gallery at the end. And as always, collect responsibly.